Hey everyone, it's Ian Benjamin, Digital Hub, and we're back. We are back. The sun's trying to come out, but it's not quite there. We are in the middle, approaching the middle of May, and I'm blessed to do version 2 or round 2 with Kianna Briggs. And I am also accompanied by Seun Odeneye. Seun is the Managing Director of a division of Mediabrands. So he's going to kind of talk us a bit about that. And Kianna, some of you may remember, Kianna was on the podcast last year. And when she was heading up the talent division within Mediabrands, and Mediabrands are a global digital agency. Kianna has been working for them for the last 3 years, 3.5 years or so. But her role has changed as of 2023. So Kianna is now the D&I manager, or ED&I manager for Mediabrands, looking after everything D&I and inclusion and equality from that perspective. So we're going to unpack that, unravel it, and I'm going to find out what she's doing, what she's been up to. So I'm blessed. Seun, Odeneye, and Kianna. Let's go. So Kianna, what's going on? Where are you now? Looking very glowy. What's happening?
Currently in Marrakesh,
right.
Living it up, 38 degrees.
Beautiful, fantastic. It's now the middle of May here, and it's really, really grim still. So I hope you're back soon, so you can kind of like you can ponder in this grey weather with the rest of us, you know.
Thanks, Ian.
No worries. And Seun, how you doing, buddy? You right? You good?
Yeah, I'm really good. I'm just wishing I was in Marrakesh now.
Yeah, me too, buddy. Me and you both. Fantastic. So Kianna, let's go dig into it a little bit. So I remember speaking to you towards the back end of last year, back end of 2022, and you explained to me new role, something was kicking on in the background. And I wasn't sure exactly what it was, and it kind of all came out that you got a new role. Because you had a pretty big role previously, looking after the talent team, different divisions across all the different brands. Like it's about 8, 9, 10 brands within.
So I did 3 brands. So I looked after Matterkind, where Seun is, Kianna, and Mediabrands. So I did 3 agencies within Mediabrands. Gotcha. But yeah, still a pretty big role. But to be funny enough, when you were talking to me last year, I actually knew I was moving into the new role, but I couldn't say anything. Yeah, kind of. I couldn't say anything. So I was like teasing a little bit, throwing a few things about D&I in there, but I couldn't actually say I was moving to a new role yet.
Yeah. Gotcha. Well, I knew you were like, you're very much massively passionate about it, and because you and you're able to articulate the different processes that you were involved in, or that you were championing on behalf of the business with the ERGs and other bits, the employee resource groups, etc. So which is fantastic. So I knew there was a massive interest there, but that's good to hear that. It's good to hear that you've made that pivot within the organisation.
Thank you.
You know what I mean? So was it? What have you been up to? If anything significant? What have you been down? Something?
Yeah, it's been a massive learning curve. I would say going into a new role with technically not much experience, but literally just kind of doing it off the cuff. So this year at Mediabrands, so I'm the D&I manager for the UK and Ireland. Luckily enough, we have a head of D&I for EMEA, so I work quite closely with her, which is great. The UK market, though, I'm pleased to say that we do quite a bit in the D&I space already, but there wasn't anyone kind of bringing it all together. So I kind of stepped in to kind of bring it all together. But we focus on 3 key areas, which is talent attraction, so all things recruitment. So I still get to work with the talent team, which is great. And then we focus on talent advancement. So anything to do with retention and developing people and ensuring that they actually stay with us once we've got them in the role.
Right.
And the third pillar is culture and community. And that's all to do with making sure people enjoy where they work, they're feeling included, it's inclusive. We celebrate all of our initiatives like Black History Month, South Asian Heritage Month, etc. And we promote all the internal things that we're doing as well. So those are the 3 key pillars that we're focusing on.
Wonderful. So were those initiatives not really in play previously, or they were sort of like not sort of behind the scenes, but not really?
Yeah, they were there. It's just that there wasn't anyone leading it. So we had the foundation. That's the good thing about it. So I'm fortunate enough that when I walked into the role, there were things that were already being done. It's just that I need to kind of establish it and just bring it all together. Gotcha. So I kind of split it into 3 key areas, which kind of it's almost like the actual employee life cycle. So it's attracting talent, developing that talent, and making sure that everyone stays, whilst feeling included as well.
Gotcha.
So I think my role is kind of bringing it all together and being that subject matter, I guess, for everyone to kind of come to.
Right.
Challenging role because I'm the only one in the UK market, and we are about 1.3 roughly, headed to 1.4 people in the UK. So
Right.
it's a big role to manage.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
I think because we've got the foundation, it's quite good. I'm quite fortunate in that aspect.
Gotcha. So because obviously through IPG and Mediabrands, I mean, how many employees in the UK? I know you're like thousands globally, but how many in the UK?
UK were roughly, last time I checked, were about 1,300 roughly. So
right, okay.
yeah, when I first joined Mediabrands, we were only about 800 people, and that was a couple of years ago. So we've grown massively in the last year or so. And I think DE&I has definitely, you know, everyone's really passionate about it. People want to get involved in it as well, which is really good for me. But I think because we've grown so much, we've had to kind of scale back on a few initiatives and just focus on what our targets are, what our metrics are, and just push forward with it.
Okay, so those targets are in terms of like diverse hires, ethnic backgrounds, but I mean, is it like from a grassroots level as well as like the senior level and also in between?
So how we do it here is that we look at the areas that we could improve on. So I think you can probably count as well in media. There isn't much Black talent available sometimes, and people of color. So we focused on Black talent and people of color, and we were set 3-year goals. I'm pleased to say that we smashed it last year. So we did really well with our goals last year, which meant that we will set new goals this year, naturally. It's still going to be around Black talent and people of colour, but we might focus, for example, on retention rather than last year, more attraction.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, obviously, individuals are joining, leaving within the first year. One of the agencies that I recruit for, I've not done anything with them as of yet, but I'm working with them on strategy for this year at the moment in time. And they said that the majority of their like younger individuals from backgrounds in London predominantly, that 75% of them that joined in 21-22 left. 75% of them left within the first year, which is like, is that a similar type of pattern?
Probably not as high. I wouldn't say our numbers are as high, but you can see it, which is why we've got the third pillar, which is culture and community. Because what I found is that usually when you're joining an organization, you stay for the people. You know, you stay for the culture. You want to be part of somewhere. You find somewhere you actually feel like you belong. So we focus on the inclusive bit a lot, and that's when our ERGs come into play. So people feel like it's a community. They come to work, they do their job, but they've also got people that look like them, speak like them. There's leaders like them as well, for example. So I think we focused on the culture bit as well, and in turn that will help with the retention.
Yeah, exactly. So excited to hear about this in terms of, because I mean, so many employers don't do that, and I speak to employers every day. And so many of them aren't doing that. But every time I speak to you and to Jess and other members of the team, I kind of get that feeling of, oh my gosh, great, such a great organisation. Do you know what I mean?
No, it is. I always say like Mediabrands is probably one of the most diverse organisations I've worked at.
Yeah, 100%.
And I felt it from my first interview when I joined the business. And now that I've been here for a couple of years, I'm seeing it more as well. You're seeing people that look like you, which is great.
Well, I've been there a couple of times, and each time I've been to like the amazing building, like the Old Street office. Definitely.
Old Bailey, that one.
Old Bailey, sorry, Old Bailey. I mean, you can see the individuals, different ethnicities that are there, and it's just a warm vibe. Do you know what I mean? It's just a very, very warm vibe.
It is. I think Mediabrands is a place where, as cheesy as it. Oh, sorry, that was me. As cheesy as it sounds, it is a place where you feel like you kind of belong. You know, you actually want to stay and do well, which is good. But we want to make sure that everyone feels like they can progress now. That's the next step. So once we've got them in business, we want them to progress and be the next leaders as well.
Good, super, fantastic. And Sean, man, over to you, buddy. Kind of leaving you out, man. Sorry about that, man. But as I come get Kianna.
Don't worry, I was nodding with agreement with everything Kianna said. So
with agreement, fantastic. So, I mean, yourself, how long have you been with the organisation now, Sean? How many years?
Probably about 4 years. I started about 4 years ago, and everything Kianna said rings true. Great organisation to work for, great clients and great people.
Superb. So what was going to be in the previous episode that I did with Kianna? We kind of covered off a background, lifted the body up in terms of her family, origins, and so forth. And so I'm just going to touch on that a little bit with yourself. So where were you born and where were you brought up?
Yeah, so I grew up in a inner city, South London, working class background. Most people around me look like me, they talk like me, similar background, similar struggles to me, right? And I guess
So big family, like lot of siblings, or
yeah. Three brothers, two sisters. Yeah, so big family. And it's interesting, kind of being brought up in Southeast London, where everybody looks at you, talks at you, because you kind of live in an echo chamber to some degree, right? And I mentioned the same struggles, but I guess struggles can be, I guess, subjective. It can be relative. But I didn't go private school. Yeah, I wasn't in any private clubs. My background was more like my late mum, who was awesome, by the way. Kind of had a cleaning job, and sometimes after school I'll go to her with that cleaning job, help her out or do my homework, right? Racism was probably more prevalent back then. Example being, I might walk into a shop and or I'm driving a car, saying that I'm walking to a shop and then I feel like the security guard's following me, or I'm driving a car and I get pulled over by the police for wearing a baseball cap. That's the sort of day and age I grew up in, right? Some of my friends were, let's call it street pharmacists, right?
So how do you kind of like, you know, the temptations? I mean, I'm not a million miles away. I live in Bedfordshire. I grew up in Luton. I still live in Luton now. My wife, kids, etc. And not a million miles away from London. And there's a lot of bad stuff that goes around here as well. It's temptations, and you can either go one way or the other. It's A or B. You've got this decision to make. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I'm sure it's pretty more hard. I wouldn't say it's harder in London. I mean, it's going to be there anyway. It's pretty around. It's not that far from where you are right now, and it's just there in over the last 20, 25 years. So yeah, that decision you had to make, you know, which way do you go? I mean, I'm sure that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good question. I'm a strong believer that you're typically a product of your environment, right? But that wasn't me, and that's probably down to the result of the greatest role model I could ask for, which was my late mum. You know, when thinking about life growing up for me, I didn't really open myself up to new cultures or new people until I went uni in the north of England, Manchester, right? And I think that's when I started to see kind of me learning new cultures. And I probably had my first, what you would call identity crisis, really, at that stage. Because
you like one of just a few black kids, young adults, young black adults in the university environment.
Exactly that. So I spoke and dressed and carried myself a certain way which was different to everyone else.
Yeah, I bet.
So that was probably one of my first times when I said, you know what, I need to start adapting to fit in, right? And this probably takes me to that piece around you being a product of your environment, right? Because when you adapt or you try to unlearn and things like that, there's pros and cons with that. The pros is that I think adapting to different circumstances is normal, but the cons is when you need to adapt because of the color of your skin. Like, I remember there was times where I'll go into a dry cleaners or a shop, and I had to really overemphasize my politeness. So that firstly, the shopkeeper didn't think I was rude, but secondly, that they didn't like press the panic button, right? And I kind of mention all of this because it's really important to understand the context of how the product in the environment can lead you down different paths, like you mentioned, and why people make some choices over the other. And when you understand this, you can really try to empathize with people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same. I mean, even now, sometimes, you know, if I go further north from where I live and they're not seeing anybody like me for a while, plus I'm absolutely enormous, nearly 7 foot tall as well. So, I naturally sometimes, depending on where I am, find myself trying to overcompensate because of like the wow factor or the oh my God factor. I mean, switch coding, I suppose, in a certain way, and sometimes I think to myself, why do I need to do that? And especially when I've got a young family, like my son's 19, right? And so seeing him and trying to shape him and show him how I am in certain environments as well, it's even more pressure when I don't know. Sometimes I haven't figured it out for myself in certain environments. So I think it's ongoing. But I think you have to take certain things, you kind of learn certain things of how to react as we go, based on experiences that you had that we're going through, help me make my decisions in terms of how I want to be and how, but it must be really, really hard, because if you're just dropped into that that area of dominantly middle class white individuals, it must be hard to kind of navigate that correctly at first in Manchester. But I think it's a continuation, especially in the role you're in now, because correct me if I'm right, if I'm wrong, sorry, you're currently the managing director of a division of the Matterkind division. So at the level you're at, there's fewer people of colour at that level. So if you're going to be negotiating or doing your meetings or doing whatever you're doing on behalf of the business, I doubt you're meeting many people like you of who are black, especially at your age as well, in everyday working environment. Or maybe I'm wrong.
Correct. Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So I mean, because
you go. Yeah.
Because I think even back in the day, the advertising media was predominantly middle class white, very, very sexy industry, still is very, very hard to get into, whether you're white. It was all sort of white or black's hard to get into. And it's very much sort of like if you knew somebody type of scenario. Because I remember I sold advertising space when I didn't go to university, selling advertising space, working with different magazines, tried to get into Maxwell back in the day, and a few other large publishing companies, and I couldn't get in there. And I mean, maybe it's because I was black. I thought it was on some occasions, and because it was that sort of industry, you know what I mean, at the time. And so it'd be good to kind of understand a bit about you in terms of how you, after university, what made you choose the media industry, or how did that unravel for you, that path?
Yeah, I think it's a really good preamble actually that you gave. And when I started the media industry as an intern at a company called Adlink Internet Media, and when I think about a company called Adlink Internet Media,
Adlink.
Adlink.
Oh, Adlink. I work for a company called Adlink. I thought, no, it can't be the same company. Okay, sorry, carry on.
When I think about when it all started for me in the media world, I would say it all started with the form of me understanding the need to adapt and unlearn. And you kind of referenced it, and that's why I think it's quite a good preamble. Because, I refuse to allow me being part of a social economic class or culture or race to hold me back. So I had to adapt and unlearn. And at the surface, when you talk about, I by the way, kind of to give you a context, I always kind of have a rant around this topic around adapting and unlearn, because when you think about it on the surface, the idea of adapting or unlearning kind of sounds like, when you hear it for the first time, is that you're kind of selling out. But to some degree, at the time, I probably thought I did. But in actual fact, when you think about the idea of unlearning, it's about adapting yourself based on the situation. So that doesn't mean you're not being true to yourself. In my mind, you're bringing a true version of yourself, but the most professional version of yourself to work.
100%.
If I illustrate that more, actually,
well, that's what I was trying to say. Yeah, you just put it another way. Exactly that. You've got to. The people say switch coding. You shouldn't have to, but I mean, you still got your identity. Do you know what I mean? You're just being who you are. You haven't got to forget your roots or whatever entirely, or your identity or your origin or your ethnicity. You are being who you are within that environment, and there's nothing wrong with that, right?
So that's the whole point. When I think about adapting and learning, it's bringing the best version of yourself to work. And like I said, to illustrate that, it's a bit like, I've used this example a couple of times. It's a bit like when I talk to my wife, it's different to how I talk to my boys. When I talk to my wife, I might drop my tone. I might go, "You all right, babe? How you doing?" When I talk to the boys, it's a bit different, right? Or how I act in a football match is different to how I act in a wedding, right? Imagine me acting like I do in a football match in a wedding. It'll be inappropriate because that's not the culture of the environment I'm in. Hence, I mentioned you kind of, a product of your environment. So, I think that's really important. You get what I mean?
100%. I'm the same. I don't chat to my missus the same way I chat to my boys or even my kids. Do you know what I mean? You just kind of like, it's different, isn't it? And
the thing about it, adapting isn't I feel for me, adapting and unlearning is a part of life, and it sometimes isn't isolated to a race. It could be a culture. It could be social economic standing, right? And when I think about it, it is probably magnified when you come from an ethnic background. But I'll be ignorant to kind of conclude that racism doesn't exist anymore, right? It does. But I guess when you think about it in the workplace, I think they've called it, you called it, I don't know what you just called it earlier, but I think I've heard it called double consciousness, something like that, yeah, double consciousness. And it's the notion that people of color have to live in two different identities, right? So I would say kind of through adapting, or rather, yeah, I would say that through adapting to culture, it's normally isolated to Black people themselves. But in most settings, it's having to adapt to a secondary identity that is foreign to what you're used to. Hence,
yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely. I've spoken about this before, probably with Kianna as well. I think it's like when when I leave my front door and I'm going into city, into town, whatever like that, it's a different world. I mean, and it's and I prepared for. I put on that armor, if you like, of potential racism or whatever that's out there, because the life that the lens that I live my life through isn't always, it's completely different to a white person's life. You know what I mean? So they don't see things or experience things that we experience as Black people. So yeah, 100%. But back inside my front door, it's different. That comes off, and that it's a different type of environment. But I would also say as well, it's definitely lesser of that over the last 10, 15 years, because we're integrating more into society, and we are moving on slowly in the right direction. But yeah, 100%. I think every Black person, when they leave, they're going out to the world, they have a different lens, if you like, or their different outlook than a white person does. Do you know what I mean? And so you have to adapt, man. 100%. But let's get back to AdLink. So you worked there. So what were you doing? Were you selling advertising space, and was it online? Was you selling print? Or
no. It was probably my road to me being managing director, and that's a weird statement to make when it's your first ever media job, right? But it was an internship. So for those that don't know, any listeners that don't know what internship is, I was in a uni course that had a sandwich course, they called it, in which you needed 1 year placement. And that was part of it. And I had the best time in that placement job. Like, it's my first intro to the world of advertising. Going, work hard, play hard sort of mentality, learning about the industry, having been able to get drunk on somebody else's pay while they were paying you out, doing all of that. That was my first introduction. And I kind of explain it with a sandwich course. Actually, this is really interesting in terms of how I became managing director. Actually, the reason why I explain around the sandwich course, because I remember when I went back to uni, and I wanted to come back in the industry. At uni, I had a come to Jesus moment, like literally, where I stopped drinking. And so when it's time for me to come back in the industry, or come back to a graduate job, I wanted to come back into the industry because I loved advertising. So I remember calling a friend / colleague of mine, right? And I said to them, just getting a bit of advice. I'm thinking of coming back. What's your thoughts? And that friend of mine / colleague, let's call him Frank for GDPR purposes, right? And I'm going somewhere, I think you'll like this story. I remember him saying to me, what's the point coming back? What's the point coming back? Because you don't drink anymore. And back then, obviously, I know I look young, but obviously, all work, Kianna agrees, obviously. All work back then was done in the pub over a pint.
100%. Yeah.
It's like, Sean, you don't drink anymore, so what's the point coming back? Why don't you just try and find another industry? Why don't you go into like IT consultancy? Because I studied business IT. So that was the advice he gave me, right? Needless to say, I didn't listen to that advice, and I came back into the industry, right? So how I progressed through kind of my role.
Not drinking. That's hard.
Yeah, that too. But how I progressed through my role in the industry was when I got that revelation of the needed to adapt and unlearn. And when I started to do that, and I started to learn certain things and adapt, I noticed I got promotion after promotion after promotion. But here's the really fascinating part is how I became MD. I remember I was at Mindshare at the time, Group M company, and I was on a leadership course. I think it was in Budapest. And one of my team sent me an email and said, oh, so-and-so's resigned. It'd be good if we could get them a counter offer. So they sent me the person in their team that the offer letter. And it was from a recruiter like yourself, right? So I read the offer, I saw how much it was. And I said to myself, oh, I know this recruiter person. He's a friend of mine. So I called him just to have a bit of banter. And I said, oh, why are you poaching my guy? Don't be doing that. And he said, oh, why don't you come over here, Cadrian, which was called Cadrian at the time, the IPG company. I said, I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. But if I was ever to leave, I wouldn't want to come and work for Cadrian. I would want to run it. And that was the end of that story. And then a few months later, he called me and said, Sean, yeah, how's it going? And he said, you know, you said to me that you'd want to run Cadrian, that's the only role you'd get. The guy that's running it at the moment is leaving. So do you want to have a chat with him? I said, okay, cool, I'll have a chat. So two or three interviews in, they've willowed it down to 2 people.
And how long ago was this, though? Can I put it into context?
4.5 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, so about 2 or 3 interviews, and they willowed it down to 2 people. Me and, who do you think it was?
The guy that left the last
Not
time.
the guy.
the guy told me not to come back into the industry.
No way.
Wow.
Needless to say, the rest is history.
Wow.
So more of that story, right, is that not every advice you should take. Right?
Yeah.
So look,
That's true, man, isn't it? It's true. Well, that's amazing. That's really good, isn't it?
Wow, what a story, Sean. I've never heard that story before.
Yeah, have you seen him since, that guy? Have you spoken to him since?
Yeah, no, he's a mate of mine. He always every time I do a post, he always send me a DM, like bannering me. Yeah.
I'd love to see those DMs, man. So, MD Matterkind, what's it like? What you're working on? How big's the team? Give the viewers and listeners an idea of what your day looks like and what Matterkind does.
Yeah, so Matterkind, the addressable arm of IPG. Essentially, everywhere there's an addressable touch point on a user. My team help deliver solutions for our clients.
Can you do demystify that? Because everyone's going to know what that means. An addressable touch point.
Yeah, I can double tap into that. So when we talk about addressable touch point, anywhere we can understand the user or users behind the screen. So, you know, if I give you real life examples, somebody's on YouTube, and we know who they are, or somebody's on a website like Auto Trader and we know who they are. Somebody's on a social environment and we know who they are. Somebody out or people rather are outside of a digital app home screen and we know who they are. We deliver for our clients to put those advertisers in front of that right user at that right place at that right time.
Okay, so in other words, so from an advertising perspective, advertising pound spending perspective, you're able to say, well, look, we can pinpoint this demographic more specifically than you can with from a website advertising through PPC or other channels. It's more specific, perhaps.
Yeah, non-traditional channels is probably the easy way of saying it. But although I say non-traditional channels, there are emerging channels out there that are becoming addressable. I mentioned digital out of home just now. There's audio, there's connected TV. So the world is becoming addressable, right? I always quote this stat to a few people all the time, which is kind of I think it's eMarketer. eMarketer mentioned by 2023, the average individual will have 10 connected devices. That could be your laptop, your iPad, it could be your Alexa speaker, it could be your AirPods, it could be your Apple Watch, etc. And it's like, so if that in itself is pretty mental. But just to add to that, that same article mentioned around your average UK consumer is going to have 2,000 ad opportunities per hour, I believe it is. So there's so much, we're living in such an addressable world when you think about it. So, and that's what excites me and excites my team. My team are awesome. I do lead that team, but I feel like I serve that team. I work alongside that team. Unbelievable team. We deliver great solutions for our clients.
Superb, fantastic, man. Well done. Climbing the ladder. It's good to see. and I think it's empowering other individuals to see, both of you as Black individuals, and for the individuals coming up to see that they can also achieve those goals as well. Do you know what I mean? So
Those stats have run off you for e-marketing. That's top of my head. But I thinking back, actually, it's actually 2,700 digital touch point per day. Leads to 100,000 ad opportunities per hour. That's it.
Right. So that's crazy, isn't it? It's just like, it's unbelievable, isn't it? Unbelievable. So you kind of working directly with brands. You work as well. So are you involved with like yourself, like hands-on communications, touch points with brands directly?
Yeah, so my team are split into three. One that services one that services Initiative, and one that services Media Hub. And it's split that way. And those teams are front and center with those agency teams, an extension of those agency teams in front of clients, delivering them solutions.
Superb. Fantastic stuff. Wonderful. So brilliant. So again, kind of get back to, well, collectively, both of you really. So I'm assuming that Kianna's kind of, your work is also overlapping into Sean's division as well?
Yeah, I think I'm fortunate. I used to work with Sean, which is great. So I'm quite biased in that Matterkind are very good when it comes to representation. I think it helps that your leader is Black, because naturally people are like, wow, a Black MD. It's not very common in the media industry. So that's definitely a selling point to candidates. But also, one thing that I was quite privileged to see when I used to recruit for Matterkind is that the leadership team was generally very passionate about DE&I, and Sean talks about it all the time, which definitely helps. So when you go to their floor, it's lovely to see that there's a mix of people from different ethnicities, different cultures, different genders, etc. And they listen when you speak. You ask them to do something, they generally do it, which is really good. But I think naturally Matterkind is part of Mediabrands, so it definitely does fall in my remit. But I don't tend to worry about Matterkind, which is pretty good.
Yeah, because obviously you got Sean there.
Yeah, exactly.
Holding the baton for you in that part of the business.
I work for Kianna, basically. What's she doing?
Yeah, so he works for me now, which is great. That's what I like to see.
Fantastic, superb, wonderful stuff. So the team's growing. So what's next for you, Sean? You staying there, steering the ship within your organisation?
Yeah, I think what's next for me, continue to drive the transformation on IPG. I generally love what I do. I love the people I work with. So I want to continue to deliver for our clients and our people.
Good, superb, fantastic. And for yourself, Kianna, I mean, what's the next part of the process for you in your? What do you mean, like you're 6 months nearly into the role, right? 5 months.
Yeah, I think for me is that naturally you want Mediabrands to hit all their targets, which is great. I want to see more people that look like us in our industry. And I think naturally Mediabrands are doing pretty well. There's always room for improvement. But for me, I want people's mindsets to change, that D&I isn't just my role. It kind of feeds into everyone's role. Yeah. So if everyone's passionate about it, we will see a change. But I think, again, I'm only 6 months into the role and I'm still learning as well. There's still elements of D&I that I don't know. So I'm still trying to learn the other assets in D&I as well. But I want to look back in a year's time and say, yeah, we've achieved 3 key things. I'd rather do 3 key things than 10 key things.
Right,
achieve 3 good things.
Yeah, doing well, like big, chunky, different things. It's really funny because over the last, beginning of this year, I've seen, I don't know if you've seen it as well or heard of this, but I've seen it firsthand where a lot of D&I initiatives from like 2 years ago, where there was a D&I manager leading the strategy, those individuals have now gone in some instances, in a lot of instances, and the role from whether it's D&I from an ethnic point of view, or a disability point of view, or a LGBTQ point of view, are now more often in the hands of the employees that are driving those initiatives. Do you know what I mean? Which is like, and so and there's less budget, and there's less people owning that. It's more falling back into laps of people or the employees, which I think is wrong in a way. I think employees were going to be supporting it, but having individuals like you who's like in a role who is driving that. I think that's the best way. I don't think it should be given to an employee to do. I think it's too important. Do you know what I mean?
I agree. I think it's a lot to give people that pressure where they should be doing it. We within Mediabrands, we have a thing called ERGs, which are employee resource groups.
Yeah.
And they're like small groups that focus on things like LGBTQ+, ethnicity, neurodiversity, etc. So ultimately, I work alongside them.
Yeah.
I used to lead one, which is great. But I can't leave them to do all the work. It's just not fair. They've got their day job as well. So it's me supporting them with their passions, but I naturally have to kind of drive it and lead it.
Yeah.
So I think D&I is, for me, it's a new thing. I think it's gotten more sexier in the last few years where everyone's talking about it now. Everyone's doing the same thing. So my goal is to kind of make it a bit more interesting where people actually want to get involved in it now, as opposed to just sitting and doing training. It's more than that.
Yeah, definitely. Without doubt, I love it. I love it. I'm glad that we're moving in that direction. The world's beginning to change.
Yeah,
definitely going to be a long road, but there's definitely a lot of signs to where we were like 4 years ago. Do you know what I mean? I think there's been significant changes. I mean, people waking up, not understanding what we were going through as Black individuals on a daily basis, and they're beginning to help out and see things differently. And even so, it's not just, as I mentioned earlier as well, not just from an ethnic point of view as well. I mean, I think we've all been had to become more aware of how other individual groups of minorities, the LGBTQ community, you've got the disability individuals as well, how they go through life on a daily basis. And so I think we're all become a bit more aware.
That's what I say. I always say when it comes to D&I, I think people assume because I'm a Black woman, I only care about ethnicity and gender. Whereas unfortunately, I actually care about everything. I kind of have to. I can't exclude one just because I identify as another. So I kind of have to make sure that everyone has a voice. It is challenging because you want to do everything, but unfortunately you can't do everything. So you've got to start somewhere. And right now we've assessed where we need to start, and that is Black talent and people of colour. But naturally that affects everyone because you've got Black people who are also part of the LGBTQ+ community, who are also neurodiverse or have a disability. So I think it's realising that D&I isn't just one thing, it's encompassing everything. And I generally
the people who put your Black thing, just to be about, about Black.
Everyone's like,
You're gonna lay down, you're saying, no, it isn't. I'm actually doing this.
I'm doing other things as well. So the more people who feel represented, I think it'll be easier to change. But I can't just say, I'm Black woman, so I'm only going to do things for people that look like me. It is generally for everyone. Yeah, good.
I mean, touching on that as well, I don't know if you've seen this as well, or recognise it over the last 2-3 years, things are changing. Obviously COVID. Then everything went online, like Zoom, like we're on now, for example, coming to the fore, working from home. I mean, before COVID, as a recruiter, I'm speaking to a candidate on the phone, and I said, Ian, look, I want to work from home, and that is it. I'd be like, sorry, man, it's not going to happen, right? It just wasn't even on the cards, wasn't even mentioned. I would dare speak to my client and say, well, John, he wants to work from home. They were like, what? It wasn't even on the table. So now that's obviously changed as well. There's people working remotely, fully remote jobs. I mean, it wasn't even a thing back then. So that's another change that we've had to adapt to. Then even now we've got the digital nomads, where countries are giving these visas so we can work from anywhere in the world, and employers are signing up to that as well. We've now got the 4-day week. Right? So I'm getting candidates speaking to me about a 4-day week. I'm tiptoeing around clients, employers saying, what's your stance on the 4-day week?
In that instance, will they take 20% pay cut, or are they going to get 80% of the pro rata salary?
Well, it's just work. That's one way of doing it. That's one question I asked straight away. So is it 20%, or they work more hours? They work more hours within the 4 days to make up the 37.5 hours on average. They're working those hours in the 4 days. I mean, some roles you can't do it. If you're a postman, right? I mean, you can't get your post delivered on only up until a Thursday. But some roles where they can put those hours together, that's what's happening. It's happening,
what's interesting, I don't even think it's a matter of them not being able to do it. If they were going to take 80% of the pro rata salary, I would say that's just flexi working. Or you could do like job shares at 50% maybe. So I think companies should be offering that. So if you're a working parent, you might only do 4 days. Or
so what do you mean? You're saying what you're saying to somebody that you only want to work like 4 days, and the other 20% of my time is shared with someone else, give it to someone else, and I get 20% of the salary.
So I'm saying multiple things. I'm saying that I think companies should offer flexi working. So job shares is one of them. So you're saying that Kianna's job, let's take my job, it's not fair to take Kianna. My job, if someone wanted to do 50% of my job, then you could do a job share with someone else that wants to do 50. That's an option. Or you might have a working parent that applied for my job when I leave, if I leave, ever left, and said, but I only want to work 4 days. So therefore, they're prepared to take 80% of the salary that's on offer. That's okay too. I don't know if I agree with the idea of, and I'm literally thinking out loud here, but the idea of putting 5 days worth of hours into 4, because the reality is, does anyone work 9 to 5? Right? So therefore, now you trying to squeeze 5 days into 4 is suggesting that everybody else just works that 37.5 when they were working 5 days a week, which isn't always true. And also, our last piece on that is that what does that do for mental well-being point of view? Trying to squeeze 5 days into 4.
That's exactly it. That's what I think as well. You know, how can it be fair? You're going to be putting that pressure on someone to work that. I totally agree. I mean, it's massively debatable, and as an MD, I think you need to kind of think about it. But there's been, I'll share some information with you after we finished today, where there was a survey done. I think the results came out in January. I think 800 companies took part in it or something like that, and 80% of them have changed to it. No, sorry. The survey was done, and 80% of the companies that took part have adopted it with no issues at all, and they're going to carry on going forward with it, with the 4-day week. Yeah, it's mad. I mean, but again, just talking about being adapting, and how we've all changed since COVID, this, that, and the other. And as an MD, you must have realised it. You know what I mean? All these things online now. With D&I, then we've got corporate social responsibility, CSR. Some companies take it to the extreme. I heard last week that I think it's Apple or another huge tech company in the US, that if an employee, a female employee, wants to have an abortion and they can't have it within their state, that they'll fly them to another state so they can have that. Because with the race for talent, I don't want to go on about this too much because I want this to be about you two more than me, but or about recruitment. But with the race for talent still high, as it were, and it's hard to find certain skills, that candidates are challenging the employer about corporate social responsibilities, what their stance is on the environment, what's their stance on D&I, for example, what's their stance on the abortions, and all other bits and pieces. So these sort of things are now coming into play where companies from a CSR perspective are moving the goalposts and are offering what we've seen as extra, let's say, benefits to secure the services of individuals. And that is one thing that I was made aware of last week, where this company is flying women that want to have an abortion that are not allowed to have them in a certain state. They live in America, and they're flying them out of state if they can accommodate them for the abortion. Which I was like, wow, I mean, it just shows you how things are changing. You know what I mean? And again, adaptability and how us as or how you as an employer, if you like, Sean, have got to be more aware of these things that are happening in the industry. I mean, happening in the economy, in the global economy, on the general scheme of things, So yeah, man, superb. Well, listen, man, look, I'm just conscious of time, and I know you're both super busy. I know Kianna wants to get back on the beach and start sipping those pina coladas, but I mean, we've got a growing platform now. We've got a growing platform. We've also started a new division of Black data professionals as well that are going to be listening to these podcasts as well. And so, is there anything that you want to say, Kianna, in terms of empowerment or of what you want to do, what you want to achieve, or what you want to share with our audience of Digital Hub listeners and viewers?
I think to piggyback off what you just said, actually, I think a lot of employers are realizing now that it is a candidate-driven market. So the candidates are the one that, thankfully, have the power, can dictate what they want. And I think as some Black people and ethnic minorities, we struggle in asking for what we want, whether it comes to that salary or flexibility or just anything really. So I would probably advise, and I've gotten better as I've gotten older and more experienced in my career, is to ask what you want. And be confident with it. Especially as women, we struggle asking for a pay increase or a promotion. So I'd probably say to your listeners is to actually go in and ask what you want and don't be afraid. The worst they could do is to say no, and then you can negotiate. But if you don't ask, you're not going to get, right. 100%. So I'd say ask what you want. It is a candidate-driven market right now, and I think people know that. So employees are more likely to be more open to negotiating salaries, etc., flexible working. And when you negotiate the package, it's not just about salary. It's about working hours. It's about increases in a year, for example. It's about everything.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's really good advice there from Kianna.
Yeah.
I mean, to ask the questions: what's the career path look like? Career trajectory? Yeah. What's the culture? What's their D&I strategy? Yeah. What they're doing? And so forth. So that's really, really good advice. Really, really good advice. Sean, anything you want to kind of say? We've got this platform here now.
I think I will close with just disagreeing with Kianna, because we're not disagreeing, have we?
Disagreeing, Sean.
And that's in the form of, I do agree. I do to some degree agree with don't ask, don't get. But actually, I think if you're a good employer and you interview someone, you pay them what they're worth, right? So, and I mention that because there's employers out there that, oh wow, you only want X. Okay, I'll give you X then. I had budget for more. Well, no, you pay people what they're worth, right? So whether it's a candidate market or not.
Yeah, but you must be up against it where you've got a role as an MD, you've got a role to fill, and you maybe aren't seeing the right sort of level of candidates coming through, and then out of the blue, you hear of somebody, or you get a CV come through from someone like me, who, oh my God, this guy's amazing, or this girl's amazing. And they say, well, it's a great job, but however, I want 20% more, or I want to work on a hybrid basis, or whatever the case may be. Have you not been in that situation?
I think the reality is though, right? The reality is, if you've got a good recruiter like we did with Kianna, right, they would be looking at the market and updating and saying, by the way, your budget's out. So you need to increase the budget. So before that candidate even asked me, I would have got approval for additional budget. So therefore, again, going back to what I said, is that I get the best candidate and I pay them what they're worth. Not below market, but I pay them what they're worth. And if the market's changed, which our HR recruitment business partner will tell us, we would adjust the budget in to reflect that.
It's changed massively. I mean, it's not so much bad this year, but 2022, I mean, some individuals were jumping from one job to the other, 30% pay increases. It was mad. It was mad. And, the candidates had the power, massively more than they have at the minute. Things have definitely slowed down a bit. But that's good, Sean. Yeah. I mean, maybe people want to work for your part of the business and may, take that they won't want to have a inflated salary, and so you can kind of push back on it. Do you know what I mean? Which is great, But not every division's, not every company's like that. You know what I mean? So, but that's it. Okay, cool. So, but in relation to, anything you want to say before we kind of wrap things up, Sean? Anything?
Don't be afraid to unlearn, adapt, and don't be afraid to progress and really try and drive your own progression.
Superb. Wonderful, guys. I want to say thank you for your time again today.
Thank you.
Kianna, as always, it's a pleasure.
Appreciate you having us.
No worries. All right, thanks a lot. Take it easy, guys. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you for all the support. If you like the content you're hearing in our episodes of Digital Hub, hit subscribe below. Thank you very much.